Breaking news, two Ben Franklin students have shrunk themselves. While showing us their cool trick, our cameraman accidentally inhaled him.
It seems that the two biology students are from Dr. Spahn's class and they are currently entering the respiratory system. You may be wondering, what is the respiratory system and what does it do? The respiratory system's purpose is to take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide.
This exchange began when our cameraman's diaphragm contracted, increasing the space in his lungs. As his lungs expanded and the air went through his nose, along with students Joe and Ella, the air and the students traveled to the sinuses where they started to be warmed and humidified. But we can also breathe through our mouths. The cameraman probably smelled Joe and Ella too, because the respiratory and nervous systems work together to identify odors in our environment. The respiratory system communicates with the nervous system through the foramina and the ethmoid bone. The olfactory bulbs, the pink structures that are above the olfactory nerves, receive input from the olfactory nerves and pass it along to the brain, which then processes and determines odor.
Let's take a look inside, where Joe and Ella will take a journey through the body. Will they make it out and teach us something along the way?
Whoa, this must be the pharynx, where the two openings of the airway, nasal cavity, and the mouth meet. Look down there. This pathway divides into two, one for food, which is the esophagus that leads into the stomach, and one for air. So it's part of the respiratory and digestive system. The digestive and respiratory systems are actually very closely connected.
Yeah, they are. The digestive tract is dependent upon the respiratory system because your digestive tract functions by using muscular contractions to break up food and move it along the tract. Similarly, your respiratory tract wouldn't be able to function without the products of digestion. While the process of exhalation is passive and doesn't require muscular contraction, you contract the respiratory muscles, including the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, to inhale. Muscles need fuel in order to contract, and the fuel they use is primarily in the form of carbohydrates and fats. The efforts of the digestive tract provide the cells of the respiratory muscles with fuel.
Look at that little flap of tissue covering the air passage. Must be the epiglottis, which seals off the windpipe to prevent food from being inhaled. What do you think is underneath?
Let's check it out.
Cool, it's the larynx, or the voice box. How do you think this works?
The short tube contains two vocal cords, which vibrate to make sounds. The air also passes through here to enter the trachea, which is our windpipe.
Whoa, this is quite a fall. Look at those little hairs. These are cilia, which sweep the airway before it hits the lungs. This long tube is made of rings of cartilage, serving as a passageway that allows air down to the bronchial tree.
Uh-oh, the trachea splits into two down there. Which way do we go?
Those are the bronchi, which both connect to the lungs, so we can take either path. When we get to the end, the bronchi turn into smaller bronchi, and then even smaller ones called bronchioles. When we finally get to the bottom of the bronchioles, we'll see the moist membrane sacs covered in capillaries called alveoli, where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide actually takes place. There are 300 to 400 million alveoli in each lung. Once oxygen ends up in the alveoli, it dissolves through the thin membrane and it is absorbed by blood in the capillaries, the tiny and narrow blood carriers.
Sounds cool. Let's go down to the lungs now.
What are those elastic tissues?
They allow inflation and deflation without losing their shape and are encased by the pleura, which is a thin tissue layer surrounding the lungs. Also, the thin tissue layer lining the chest cavity. So what exactly are the lungs?
The lungs are a pair of spongy, air-filled organs located on either side of the chest, or the thorax, protected by the ribcage. It's almost like they belong together. Breaking news, we've just received word that the students have officially made it to the lungs.
While alveoli hand over the oxygen, the capillaries are switching out CO2 that the circulatory just picked up, swapping gases.
Hopefully, Joe and Ella are too big to be absorbed by the capillaries and just get pushed out of the lungs with the CO2 during exhalation.
Why does it matter if they get absorbed by the capillaries?
Well, the circulatory system and the respiratory system work closely together to ensure that organ tissues receive enough oxygen. Oxygen is required for cellular functions. The air breathed in and held in the lungs is transferred to the blood. The blood is circulated by the heart, which pumps the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the body. Additionally, the two body systems work together to remove carbon dioxide, which is a metabolic waste product.
Asthma is a chronic disease that affects the airways. If you have asthma, the inside walls of your airways become sore and swollen. They get narrower and your lungs get less air. Asthma can usually be managed with rescue inhalers to treat symptoms and controller inhalers that prevent symptoms. Lung cancer is a condition that causes cells to divide in the lungs uncontrollably. This causes a growth of tumors that reduce a person's ability to breathe. Early diagnosis can help a person seek treatment as early as possible in the disease's course. Identifying lung cancer in its earliest stages can be difficult because the symptoms may be similar to those of a respiratory infection. People with non-small cell lung cancer can be treated with surgery, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, or targeted therapy. Tuberculosis is a potentially serious infectious disease that mainly affects your lungs. The bacteria that cause tuberculosis are spread from one person to another through tiny droplets released into the air via coughs and sneezes. Many strains of tuberculosis resist the drugs most used to treat the disease. People with active tuberculosis must take several types of medications for many months to eradicate the infection. Pneumonia is an infection that inflames the air sacs in one or both lungs. The air sacs may fill with pus, causing cough with phlegm, fever, chills, and difficulty breathing. A variety of organisms, including bacteria, viruses, and fungi, can cause pneumonia. Treatments include antibiotics, cough medicine, and fever reducers and pain relievers.
Breaking news! The students have actually been exchanged in the capillaries with the oxygen and entered the circulatory system. For any of you who are not aware of the function of the circulatory system, it is to circulate blood to transport nutrients like amino acids and electrolytes, oxygen, carbon dioxide, hormones, and blood cells to and from the cells in the body to provide nourishment and help in fighting diseases, stabilize temperature and pH, and maintain homeostasis.
Joe and Ella will be collected by the deoxygenated blood that will be oxygenated as the oxygen dissolves through the thin membrane of the alveoli into the capillaries. They will flow into the bigger and bigger veins that become the pulmonary vein and flow into the newly oxygenated blood into the left atrium of the heart.
While we're here at the heart, let me fill you in on the details. The heart is a muscular organ that pumps blood through the blood vessels of the circulatory system. It has three tissue layers. The epicardium is the outermost, with the myocardium in the middle, and the endocardium on the inside. It is in a sac called the pericardium. As you can see, it is split into four chambers: the left atrium, the left ventricle, the right atrium, and the right ventricle. There are four valves in the heart to control blood flow: the mitral valve and the tricuspid valve, which control blood flow from the atria to the ventricles, and the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve, which control blood flow out of the ventricles.
I see we've arrived in the left atrium with the oxygenated blood. I see lots of different cells in this blood.
Ah yes, I see a red blood cell, hemoglobin. The protein inside the red blood cell carries oxygen.
They're also called erythrocytes. Red blood cells also remove CO2 from your body by transporting it into your lungs for the respiratory system to get rid of. Did you know that they're actually made inside of your bone marrow? Oh, there's a white blood cell, or leukocyte.
We need to protect against these illnesses and diseases. They fight bacteria, viruses, and other invaders trying to threaten our health. They're also made inside the bone marrow. There are 5 kinds: monocytes, lymphocytes, neutrophils, basophils, eosinophils.
And there's a platelet.
It's so small, I have trouble seeing it. These cells help our body from clots when we begin bleeding. The platelets adhere to the site of the injury and send out chemical signals to more platelets to pile onto the clot, or to aggregate.
What's the other stuff?
That's plasma. Plasma is the largest component of our blood, about 55%. It carries water, salts, and enzymes, and its purpose is to transport nutrients, hormones, and proteins, and remove waste that cells deposit into it. Blood plasma also pushes the movement of all of the elements of blood through the circulatory system.
So how does oxygen-rich blood get from the heart to the tissues of the body?
It goes through blood vessels called arteries, which are muscular tubes lined by smooth tissue.
Oh yeah, they have 3 layers, right? The intima, the inner layer lined by a smooth tissue called endothelium. The media, a layer of muscle that lets the arteries handle the high pressures from the heart. And the adventitia, connective tissue anchoring arteries to nearby tissues.
Exactly. They all work together to pump blood through the tissues. However, they all surround one central artery, the aorta. It's the main high-pressure pipeline connected to the heart's left ventricle. It branches into a network of smaller arteries that extend throughout the body.
And that's where the arterioles and capillaries come from. They must be those small branches from the arteries.
We know that arteries help blood move out of the heart, but how does it get back?
That's what the veins are for. They carry the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. The pulmonary and umbilical veins are different. They carry oxygenated blood back from the tissues. Veins are different from arteries because they're less muscular and are often closer to the skin. Most veins have valves to prevent backflow.
Let's jump in the bloodstream and take a final sightseeing trip throughout the body.
You may be wondering the path the students took through the circulatory system. As you can see, the students in the oxygenated blood came from the lung to the low pressure left atrium of the heart through the pulmonary vein. From there, they and the oxygenated blood went into the high pressure left ventricle and left through the aorta that will branch into smaller arteries and arterioles to oxygenate the blood cells. The arterioles branch into capillaries that the blood flows through.
Then the now deoxygenated blood flows into venules that connect to larger veins. The blood from the lower part of the body flows through the interior vena cava to the right atrium of the heart, and the blood from the upper part of the body flows through the superior vena cava to the right atrium. The deoxygenated blood will go into the right ventricle and then be pumped through the pulmonary artery to the lungs to remove CO2 and collect O2. The now oxygenated blood will take the pulmonary vein back to the left atrium of the heart.
Now, for a quick message from our advertisers, Falcon Medical Incorporated.
A stroke is a brain attack. It occurs when blood flow to an area of brain is cut off. When this happens, brain cells are deprived of oxygen and begin to die. When brain cells die during a stroke, abilities controlled by that area of the brain, such as memory and muscle control, are lost. To treat a stroke, doctors must quickly restore blood flow to your brain. Hemophilia is usually an inherited bleeding disorder in which the blood doesn't flow properly. This can lead to spontaneous bleeding as well as bleeding following injuries or surgery. The main treatment for hemophilia is replacement therapy. A heart attack usually occurs when a blood clot blocks blood flow to the heart. Without blood, tissue loses oxygen and dies. Symptoms include tightness or pain in the chest, neck, back, or arms. Treatment ranges from lifestyle changes and cardiac rehabilitation to medication, stents, and bypass surgery. Cardiac arrest is a sudden loss of blood flow caused by the heart failing to pump properly. The irregular beating comes from a lack of organized electrical activity in the heart muscle, meaning that there isn't any constant contractions on the ventricles. Signs of cardiac arrest occurring include a lack of a pulse as well as no breathing and loss of consciousness.
Joe and Ella, what a journey you've taken today. While you traveled through our cameraman, we filled our excited viewers on the details of your trip. Now that we've learned about the circulatory and respiratory systems of the human body and understand how our insides function, we'd like to know how these systems work together and work with other systems to power human life.
Well, the circulatory system and the respiratory system work closely together to ensure that organ tissues receive enough oxygen. Oxygen is required for cellular functions. Additionally, the two body systems work together to remove carbon dioxide, which is a metabolic waste product. That's how we were able to travel through both systems today.
The nervous system issues sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers to the heart, which regulate the rate and the strength of the heartbeat. Conversely, the circulatory system nourishes the entire nervous system and removes its metabolic waste. Certain arteries have sensory nerve endings that conduct signals to the nervous system, informing it of blood pressure and blood pH, oxygen, and CO2 levels.
The digestive system also works closely with the circulatory system because nutrients that are digested and absorbed by the digestive system are transported throughout the body by the circulatory system. Food is digested in the stomach and the small intestine, and the molecules are then absorbed into the walls of the small intestine. Absorbed nutrients pass through the thin walls of the capillaries and join the bloodstream, where they will be transported to cells all over the body.
Very cool. Because you take Dr. Spawn's class, fabulous. biology class, let's say. You must know how the circulatory and respiratory systems in these creates compared to ours.
Of course we do. For respiration, amphibians do not have a diaphragm. Instead, they pump air in and out of the lungs by expanding and contracting.
Alternatively, fish have gills to mediate the gas exchange. Water containing dissolved oxygen enters the fish's mouth, and the animal moves its jaws and operculum in such a way as to pump the incoming water through the gills. As water passes into the gill filaments, blood inside the capillaries picks up this dissolved oxygen.
I didn't know that. What about circulation?
In amphibians, blood flow is directed in two circuits, one through the lungs and back to the heart, and the other throughout the rest of the body and its organs, including the brain. Amphibians have a three-chambered heart that has two atria and one ventricle.
Fish have a single circuit for blood flow and a two-chambered heart that has only a single atrium and a single ventricle. The atrium collects blood that has returned from the body, while the ventricle pumps the blood to the gills where gas exchange occurs and the blood is reoxygenated. This is called gill circulation. The blood then continues through the rest of the body before arriving back to the atrium.
Wow, you guys know so much. I wish I could take Dr. Spawn's class. I'm so glad we could follow you on your wild adventures through the body today, and I hope to have you back soon to shrink down and make more discoveries for us. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Science News.